All right, let's have a quick look at our image again. We have our line art. Remember, I've placed this back up to 100%. Lock that. And we have our flatting layer. Again, this is just solid blocks of color. Awesome. Let's lock that. And I also have my visor, which I'm going to vary between being on the front and the back until we get to that. And I'm going to lock that. We have a background layer, which is white, but it's just going to help us for cleaning up. Now we're going to have a look at adding some textures to our image, and also we're going to look at adding some shadows and highlights. Now there's a few things that we need to sort of keep in mind when we are selecting our textures and applying them. And this is what the textures are, what they're made of, how they interact with each other, and our lighting effects. So we need to keep close mind as to where our light source is actually going to be coming from. So where it's going to hit, where the light is going to bounce, and its bounce light is going to vary on our particular objects, and I'll get into that as well. So first things first, let's figure out what we want. Well, I'm going to say this is some sort of aviation spacesuit. I'm going to say it's covered in some sort of enamel paint, possibly made out of metal. So I'm going to look for some metal textures, painted possibly, and depending on your textures, it's going to define the style. So if it's brand new, straight out of the factory, it could be a highly polished, material, hasn't seen any wear or tear or anything like that, in which case you're going to have to apply appropriate materials for that. If it is fairly old, if it's seen a bit of damage, maybe you want to start with some textures that we can apply to this. And remember, with textures, we can add multiple layers over the textures. So we can create divots and rust and stuff, and we can place that onto an existing one. So we do have a lot of variation in there. So we've got some metal objects, possibly plastic, and we also have some skin, some hair, the eyes going to be an issue. So we're going to look at getting some nice skin textures that we can apply to this and give it a bit of realism. And we also maybe have some electronic components which we can add, and we can really go pretty far with this kind of thing. Maybe for this section here, I want some sort of flexible rubber corrugated situation going on in there. So don't feel constrained just because it's a big blank area. We could put all sorts of embossing and stuff on this as well. I could perhaps want to, turn these into leather straps or something like that, so we can go sort of steampunk effect. Now, as we go along with this, you may wish to add to your image, add other effects and other depths and stuff like that. By all means, start doing that. But I'm going to show you how to start setting up our textures. So let's get rid of that layer there, and let's continue on. Now, obviously, we have a number of sources for this. Google Images is a fantastic resource. You may also be required to take some photographs, get some textures that you're going to use yourself. And importantly, when we are searching for images, is that we keep in mind the resolution. So, for example, if I want to find a nice rust metal image, I may actually want to type the word texture in here as well. We're generally looking for flattened images, and obviously here comes a whole lot up here. Now, as I hover over these, we are going to see they're going to have varying resolutions. So this one here, 4000 by 2016, that's quite a high resolution. That could be quite a good one because we can really get into detail for that. Now, I'm going to show you a couple other really quick things with this. So once this one's downloaded, we have a few options. Now, depending on your operating system and how your configuration is, you may have the possibility of grabbing that texture once it's finished loading and taking it directly onto your image. Now, again, this is fairly large. I'm going to show you this option because there is some variance in how we apply an image into Photoshop. So if I simply drag this into Photoshop and move that around, it's placed directly on there. And that is actually about the size of the image in real terms as far as its pixel sizing, which is kind of cool. It's pretty big, but that's good. It means we can zoom in and get some detail. You really need to be aware that we're not going to get anything that's too pixelated. Now, the other option is that I actually save out that image. So you could right click and go save image as, for example, and I can save it to my desktop. Not the best place, but we can add it on there. And if I jump to my desktop, grab that image, and I'm going to drag that and place it directly into Photoshop. Now, you'll notice there's a very subtle difference when this one's placed. It has a box bounding and an X in it. Now, what this is trying to do is trying to import this in as a smart object. So you can adjust this according to what size you want it to be placed in. Remember, hold down Shift to maintain or constrain the transformation. Enter, which is going to allow me to place it. We now have the two images here. I'm going to put the new one at the top and the older one down the bottom. Now, they're both exactly the same. They're both exactly the same size. They're the same image. The difference is this one has, one that's at the top that I just imported in, has this smart object emblem on it. And I'll show you why that comes in really handy. I'm going to shift select on both of those and hit Control T to transform. I'm going to grab the corner and then hold down Shift. I'm going to shrink these down. Just move them across. Let's shrink them down some more. Really small. Enter. A little bit small. Let's scale them back up again. I'm going to go Control T again. They're both still selected, and I'm going to scale them back up. So the bottom one is actually slightly larger. And hit Enter. And what we actually find is the one that's a smart object still has its full resolution. The other one, which isn't a smart object, once it's been transformed, it loses that. So when it gets scaled up, Photoshop tries to interpret that, but it ends up being a blurry image. So the thing with smart objects is use them, scale them down, place them. Once you've got them into position, then you can do what we call rasterizing, which means you can stop it from being a smart object. This does come in handy. There's only certain things you can do with smart objects. You can't do warps for them, on them, for example. So at a certain point, you may need to rasterize. And to do this, simply right-click on the layer and go to Rasterize Layer. The other option is to go to Layer and to Rasterize. You go Smart Object or Layer, and that will do that as well. But for now, I'm going to leave that as a smart object. I'm going to delete the second one. So let's look at how our board is set out. And at the moment, we have this layer, which is a texture, and it's kind of in the way. You know, our main image is there. We can't really put off to the side because it kind of disappears. So there's a few options with this, and I'm going to show you two of them, and hopefully one of them is going to be your preferred method. The first one I'm going to show you is a relatively new one, and that is using artboards. Now, artboards have been used for years. Illustrators had them for years. Photoshop's only recently had them included. And to get hold of artboards, you can go to Layer, New, and go to Artboard or Artboard from Layers. And if we select all those and go Layer, New, Artboard from Layers, we can name it. And put some presets. I'm going to hit OK. And it's placed all of those objects into an artboard, which is pretty cool. Now, over here in our Move tool, shortcut V, we also have an artboard tool. So Shift V will get you to the artboard tool, and this will bring up these little circles with squares in them. And by clicking on those, we can create a new artboard. And if we zoom out, we can see we can create multiple artboards, and we can rename them, and we can move them around, and all that kind of stuff. So this is great for doing, if you're doing a book or a pamphlet or something that's going to require multiple pages, you can now have them all in one page. The other thing you can do is you can duplicate. And I'm not going to get too far ahead with this, but if you hold down Alt or Option, and click on the circle, you'll notice the little black and white arrow will now appear, and it will duplicate and it will create a duplicate of everything in that artboard. Do be wary, this can make really large file sizes, so use with caution. But for the now, this is fine. I now have select my brush layer, and as you can see, I'm still moving around, but it's still kind of hidden by the background. What I need to do is actually drag this all the way out, and bang, now it's outside of my image. So I can place multiple images around this screen, and I can drag them in and use them as required. So it's a great way to sort of do shopping for your textures. So that's what we're kind of going to need to do. I'm going to drag this back into my artboard, like so. So now it's inside the artboard, and I'm actually going to remove these from my artboard. I'm just going to drag them out. Just delete that one. Just delete artboard without the contents, and let's instead look at a different technique. Now, this is one that I've used for many years before artboards came along, and that is stretching out your canvas. Now, you may want to maintain that in paper size. So what I'd recommend is bring up rulers if they're not already up. The shortcut is Control R. It's in View Rulers, and as you can see, as I toggle on and off, it brings up these actual rulers here, and you can click in the upper area and drag that down, and that should allow you to make sure you select on the ruler, create a grid of some guides for your image. So that's pretty good. Now we know how big our original image is. Let's stretch it out. Now, there's a few ways of doing this. One way, we can go to Image. We can go to Canvas Size, and we can choose the new width and height. We can also choose the direction that we're going to send that height. So I'm going to change it from pixels to %, and I want it to be wider and maybe have it off to the left here. So make sure that the arrows are pointing off to the left, and I'm going to increase the width to 200%, and I'm going to hit OK. And that extends that out. I may need to recolor my background if I want, like so, and now I can move, make sure I go back to my arrow tool, not my artboard tool, and I can move my texture back over there. It's still a smart object, so the great thing is now I can shrink that down, and I can always increase it back up again afterwards. So those are the two main options. There is another option as far as getting your screen to that size. Rather than going image canvas size, we can also go to our crop tool. Now, the shortcut for that is C. It's over here on the toolbar. And this will bring up this option here, which will not only allow you to shrink and choose where you place your image if you want to cut everything down, but also allows you to expand the size of your canvas. So I can go, yeah, I want it this wide, or I want it this high, or I could even rotate it if I wanted to. So a couple of options there as far as that. I'm just going to expand mine out and say yes, and enter, and that will go ahead and do that. Just a word of caution when you are using the crop tool. If you do cut down your image, you say, I just want to focus on this area, and you confirm that, that will actually physically cut down your images. So what I mean by that is we grab our flattening layer, let's hide these guys, which will actually cut those off. So just a word of warning as far as that goes. But sometimes when you get to the end, that's what you need to do. So once again, I'm just going to expand that out, and let's just drop in a color fill And about there, hit enter, and let's expand that out. Great. Up to you which technique you use, artboards or this. So grab some textures, place them into your workspace, and let's get texturing.